Hello. Look, we're here. We're here. Unbelievable. When has this ever happened before? Not in living memory, as far as I'm aware. All I can remember is Blade Runner running forever. And now it's not. So there we go. So we're here to talk about Symbaroum. We're here specifically to do the campaign roundtable. Yes, that is a thing. It's not just two words shoved together. How dare you? Before we do, obviously there's the usual promo crap. Check down below for links. We're on YouTube, we're on Twitch, social media, Patreon, Discord, merch store. Oh my god, so everything forever. We're also running a number of weekly campaigns at the moment. Mondays is alternating between Warhammer and We Deal in Lead. Wednesdays, obviously, is going to return to Symbaroum sometime soon. Wicked Ones is currently fortnightly on Thursdays, and that's going to switch to Yellow King quite soon. We also run one-shots. The next one is on a week on Sunday, and I can exclusively... Is it week on Sunday? No, week on Saturday. And I can exclusively reveal that on Saturday, May 4th, we'll be playing Cloud Empress, which is pretty fun idea. Yeah, so that's it, really. Sam couldn't join us tonight. He's doing far bigger and better things. I working, but we're gonna do it without him anyway because we don't care. He's not really our friend. Right. So the whole format that he is our friend, just because Mike looked like he was worried that Sam would take that really seriously. So what is this? What is this? Well, what we're going to do is sort of recap the campaign so far in a very light, jovial, chatty way. And we're also going to give some of our thoughts on the different stories, on the campaign as a whole, all that stuff. Yeah, that's about it. For anyone tuning into this for a really hardcore, nuanced, exact look at what has happened in the campaign so far, that's probably not really what we're going to be doing. Although there will be a video coming out on YouTube before we start Symbaroum again that will do that, which will just be me writing out a long thing, reading it out, and putting it over some lovely Symbaroum art. So if that's what you're after, maybe go look for that because maybe it's there already. Although if you're watching this live, it definitely isn't. So there we go. All right, folks. So we got Chris, we got John, we got Mike, we got Stephen. They're all happy to be here, obviously. And let's start by talking for a while about the first part of this campaign, for which I'm sure Stephen will have a lot of opinions. And that is the part I have. Well, I'm making it sound like I came up with the term "the Copper Crown," which I didn't. We started by running the sort of default stories of Symbaroum, part of which is present in the core rulebook. And I have got myself a little list of what I consider all our arcs to be. So I'll run through those one by one. And then I was thinking about literally just randomly springing each of these on people and say, what happened in that? Not in depth.
Cannot wait.
Right?
This is going to be great.
I think that would be a great idea. And I'm going to roll randomly for it, and I'm not going to reset the roll each time either. So maybe Chris will just end up doing it all. Who knows? So we started off with a kind of prologue stream, which then turned into a very heavily adapted version of the Promised Land, which is the story in the core rulebook. So with that in mind, and I realize that this is a dreadful thing to do, and I didn't even warn anyone about it. Oh, look, it's me. I'm going to talk about the prologue and the Promised Land. So our very first session, our session 0, is actually something. It was a bit adapted from the Promised Land, and it had a cast of characters traveling over the Titans, arriving in Ambria for the first time. But it became quite obvious to those of us who kind of like read more of the setting that it was set quite a number of years before the default setting. Thistlehold was still being built. The caravan went into Davokar to try and go treasure hunting, and everyone, except for maybe a couple of people, met a horrible, horrible demise. And it kind of set the scene for the campaign. It set the scene for Symbaroum as a setting. And yeah, there's been some links to later stuff. Like one of those characters was related to Arendar, John's character. But otherwise, not really campaign impactful, just like an atmospheric setting. And then we had a couple of sessions which were just kind of adapting the rest of the part of the Promised Land, which was a couple of barbarian brothers who'd been corrupted in that original travel, had to be hunted down outside Thistlehold, and there was a conversation with them, with the characters, and with some elves. All very simple, very straightforward start, and nothing world changing or highly dramatic has happened since. It's all very small stories, but nothing really having any impact. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary of that first bit. Does anyone have any thoughts about it? It was a long time ago now. It was probably about 3 years ago.
I was just digging through the YouTube to try and find out when did we first go live, because you're asking us. What you're asking is next to impossible, given the fact I can't even remember what I had for breakfast today.
I think it was late August or early September 2020.
It was early September.
Yeah. Peak pandemic.
Do you remember? No. No, I do not.
No. That's fair. It's to this day, and I will double check this in the stat machine. I believe it is to this day our most viewed video. Our very first Symbaroum video. Let me just absolutely verify that as soon as YouTube decides to respond.
I guess it makes sense that the most viewed would be the first video and not like the 57th.
Oh yeah, for sure. But it's also kind of odd that like nothing we've done since has been as popular. That's the other way to look at it.
Maybe everyone hated it,
and that's why. Yeah. But yeah, it is standing at our most viewed video on YouTube with a full 1.2k views over the next most popular.
If you watched the first episode and then haven't watched anything we've done since, why not drop us a comment to let us know?
Good one.
Please also explain why you're watching this.
Yeah. So that's it. Does no one have any for me personally, the prologue video, the session 0, is still probably one of my. I'm quite glad it's popular because it's still one of my favorite things we've done. Because I like doing horrible bait and switches. Like people think that these are the characters they're going to have for an entire campaign, and then they get horribly murderized in the first 2 hours of play.
I recall very clearly telegraphing the fact that we shouldn't get attached to these characters.
Yeah, I did.
They were kind of book-generated ones, weren't they? We were.
Yeah, they were adapted ones of the defaults of the book. Yeah.
So you guys didn't go into it then with a kind of with any illusions about this is a jolly gung-ho treasure hunt into the forest.
I think that was the kind of vibe in the caravan, and then they got to the forest.
Nice.
Yeah. I think like the first. Sorry, you go, Mike.
I was just going to say, I remember that first session, the prologue session, being like a very good introduction into the world of Symbaroum, because it does explain like a little bit about the history of the sort of migration, diaspora of people heading north, and we kind of got like to sample like I think we did get to like kind of sort of get a taste of like the kind of treasure hunty Davakari side of things, but we perhaps didn't get the kind of more like Thistlehold interaction, social like element to it, which is fine because it would have been too much in all in one session. But like to go from like that taste of like Symbaroum and treasure, that taste of Davakar and treasure hunting into then the actual sort of first campaign, and then kind of experiencing that was like a nice way to do it, I thought, because we were sort of, it gave our ourselves like a reason to be fearful of going into the forest as well.
Exactly. And I think like setting out that stall is pretty important in Symbaroum. So yeah, and it got you a view of like the kind of development of the world to go from that session where you're like going past like a kind of nascent Inderos and an even more like foundational Thistlehold only really just starting to be built, and then like we pick up the next session 10 years later, Thistlehold is a bustling town. Like it gives that sense of progression in history, which I really liked. I honestly can't really remember the next two sessions following that. I can't really remember how I adapted it for you going after the barbarians and stuff. So it clearly wasn't hugely memorable. Maybe I think it was just a gentle introduction.
Yeah, I think it actually kind of started quite like punchily. I think that quite a lot happened in that first session, and I think that it again, like we kind of needed that introduction to like some of the different groups, beings within this world, right? Like we needed that time to get to know the elves, and also like even Ascarai is changing and stuff like that. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot to introduce, so no doubt we spent quite a bit of time on that, and then that led into another quite introductory style adventure for the campaign, which is the slightly comically named Blight Night, which I remember not even saying that was the name at the time because I thought that's a bit silly, and I think I revealed much later accidentally that was the name of it when I just mentioned it, and everyone was like, we did do a story called Blight Night, and then I explained what that bit was, and everyone was like, I can't believe that's the name of that thing. And to tell us what that thing is, Chris, why don't you tell us about Blight Night? I'll take it if people genuinely can't remember.
Can I get a hint, or can I fabricate wildly?
It was at the inn. It's the
the Yum Yum Inn. Yeah, Jacquard's Heart. That was great fun.
Yeah, Jacquard's Heart.
So didn't we do this on our way back from the confrontation with the two brothers?
Yeah, you did.
Recall
I detoured you. Yeah.
And we came across a delightful little place which in the middle of nowhere, built around some potentially Symbaric well or temple or little shrine, and it served good food, and we all had a great time. We met the first of that fucking bard sticks with me as the most horrible thing Matt has ever put on screen. And we've had some pretty awful, goopy, bloody battle scenes, but what was his name?
Blackheart
the bard. What was the actual thrust of it? So did we get the sense that we were being followed, or that there was something going on?
No, it wasn't really anything to do with you. It was like the inn just became besieged overnight, and it was kind of a surprise.
Yeah, and that's eventually we kind of worked out that there was something going on up on the hill, it was besieged by goblins, which will become important later if we go into the spin-offs. And this witch had convinced these goblins and drugged these goblins into a wild frenzy of attacking the place, I believe, to get access to the water of the well, which had healing properties.
Yeah, that was the idea.
The well's guardian, I suppose. The well's gardener is more accurate. Was probably the most delightfully adorable ogre I think that we've met, and who I would still die for to this very day.
Mangold. Mangold. Yeah.
Yeah.
It also featured the first. It featured the first boss fight of the thing, which Elle, who isn't in the campaign anymore, but who Elle's character promptly decapitated in one attack, leading me to kind of realize that combat in Symbaroum can be really fucking swingy. So and then very impromptu improvised the headless body getting back to its feet for another round,
which lasted exactly one other round as well.
Yeah, Yeah.
But that did feature Elle stealing the great sword, I think, which ended up becoming our kind of first item, which was great.
Yeah, I forgot that she took that for ages. I can't
You
remember
never-
what it's called. Is it called Black Thirst, something like that?
I think we just referred to it as Nightblade, but I think that was the name of the
That was the name
body
of
we took it from.
the baddie. Yeah.
You never forget your first cursed item, do you?
No.
No, it was great. It actually burned with a black flame, which is why Steo to this day is very suspicious of Alindra's situation. I have a funny feeling it might be the same mechanic.
I think it is, but it's inbuilt into the blade rather than having to have the ability. But it's the same thing in that you use corruption. So yeah. I just changed the color of it from because I think Revenant Strike is purple, right?
It's we invented that as flavor.
All right, fair enough.
So I didn't realize
it's the same
that
thing.
there had been a previous similar sword, but that's kind of cool. Yeah. Like,
but that's the sword itself rather than the person. So, yeah. But yeah, I think it's the same mechanic. Yeah, and you fought off the goblins, and yeah, the goblins in question, the Varaguldru tribe, definitely reappeared, or the survivors of them reappeared quite a bit later in our Fetters of Stone offshoot, which we will, if we get some time at the end, let's talk about Fetters of Stone, because it's not part of the campaign as such, but it's definitely the same canon and linked to it. Indeed, Arendar first appeared in Fetters of Stone. So there we go. Okay, moving on to the next section then. The next story we did, as I imagine for most people in running through the Copper Crown, the next one we did is Mark of the Beast. And let's have that talked about by someone I was hoping to talk about it, partly because I love putting him on the spot, but also because his character definitely had the most memorable moment in the arc Mark of the Beast. Mike, why don't you tell us about Mark of the Beast?
God. I actually knew the one that Chris just talked about, but this one is escaping me. Was this where we first met Balmello?
Well, it's not. You first met Balmello in the very beginning one, but this is the one where you re-met Balmello.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the one where someone is flaying the serial killer in Thistlehold who's flaying people. Is that one?
Got you. I actually think that the party split here then, and I think that we may be split because I was away for a week or two or something like that. And I think that the main party did some sort of like serial killery kind of sleuthing in Thistlehold, trying to find this flayer. I think that Anton like simultaneously traveled sort of further southwest beyond Jackad's Heart to a little village. I can't remember the reason for him going there, but he did.
Glimmervan, right? We've been to it a couple of times. Glimmervan, yeah.
That's right. And
it was because your manager at the church had sent you there on something. I think they were like setting up a new church building or something. They wanted you to check it out.
Oh no, I think I was like investigating.
I think he just liked to send you on boondoggles that he couldn't be asked doing himself.
Yeah,
and it's just some kind of I think someone had complained about there was complaints about like a cult or something, right?
Yeah,
and then you went to look at it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, the cult. Yeah, the other guy already took care of all that."
Right.
Which led, of course, to the thing of Balmello, your witch hunter ally. Well, why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell it, Mike?
Yeah, it turned out to be someone like a cult leader, I guess, or some sort of dark power who'd assumed the identity of Balmello.
After killing him, which was your which was the big moment. Yeah, you found his body. Cut to the group in Thistlehold with Balmello going, well, we better go to this dangerous place together then.
Right. And a race against time for Anton to get back there to warn them. And then a bit of a showdown underground in Thistlehold, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, with
And-
the Flayer, who and Baumello, and it kind of like erupted into like a three-way conflict essentially.
Yeah, and I believe that Baumello escaped from that.
He definitely did, and the fake Baumello turned up later once more.
Yes.
So yeah, there we go. Any like we haven't really been pausing for initial thought, but I felt that these first starting ones were a bit short to kind of like jump in that every time with. But like, has anyone got any particularly good memories or thoughts about that first sort of segment? Prologue, Blight Knight, and Mark of the Beast. Anything that leaps out, or anything you didn't like?
At the time, it felt pretty huge in terms of plot and import of what we were solving, like a whole ass murder mystery. And now it's a footnote. It's
only just getting started.
Local news to the geopolitics we're dabbling in at the minute.
Yeah.
It's worth highlighting though that the Mark of the Beast, that one did involve the Copper Crown overall plot.
Yes.
But also that's the first time we came across the Iron Pact, because one of the victims was a member of the Iron Pact.
Contact in the Thistlehold, yeah. Master Vernon?
I want to say Vernon, but
yeah. Who like is, and this is interesting. We'll come back to this a few times. In that I've said that like if I had to run Throne of Thorns again, one of the things I'd do would be to make a lot of the stakes more personal for the characters by linking them to people like Elindra, not Elindra, God, too many Elindras, to Anadea, to Elmendra, stuff like that. And I think if I was doing it again, I would have Vernon have been like, I'd have started the campaign with you under the impression that he's going to be like the group's like patron and mentor at first, right? And then bam, second major story, you find his skinned body. Like, I think I would have done something like that to have made it again more personal stakes. But yeah, it's still quite good. It's a nice little story. The Baumello's body thing is definitely the like twist highlight of it.
Yeah, that was a fantastic cliffhanger.
I think as well, like it kind of like really gave you that sense. It gave you as a player that sensation of like there's a hell of a lot going on like beyond your immediate party as well, and like you feel like a very small piece of a world.
Yeah, and you're like seeing the edges of it all, and then like over time it like starts unveiling itself. So the next thing we did was another very short scenario called Curse of the River Goddess, which is almost like a kind of transitional little story from us getting from one bigger story to another story. And the person who's going to take us through that is none other than Chris again.
Good, because I really like this one, because I'm a boat fan. So we were going from that town up the river to the town down the river on Lake Volgova, both of which I've not forgotten the names of.
I can't immediately remember the name of the town you left from, but the one you arrive at is Jakar.
Yeah, Jakar. So we got aboard this, I believe, kind of tribesman's boat. Big kind of river ferry.
It's Ambrian. It was Ambrian.
Oh, it was just staffed by a load of.
I think there were a couple of Northerners on the crew, but it was an Ambrian trader.
Yeah, there were, because I distinctly recall Steo kind of, because they had like little river rituals to placate the river spirits, and Steo was very interested in that and was trying to help and stuff like that. But there was a lot of stuff. We had a stowaway. And there was also drama between the crew as it was, and that kind of framed the whole spookiness of the situation on the river, because it turns out there was another stowaway on the boat, or more politely near the boat, who was picking crew members off, And it was just a very nice, small, contained little story. I
Nice little
enjoyed that.
I think took 2 sessions for us, and it's this sort of thing where you're like, oh, what's going on the boat? Is there a killer? We've just had a murder mystery, and then it turns out there's a massive lobster hanging off the bottom of the boat, grabbing people and munching on him, and it's just, oh, okay, this is a different story ending to maybe the one we were anticipating. But yeah, it's a fun little one. Those both come in. Look, Blight Knight and Curse of the River Goddess are both together in just a PDF only release they did, and they're both like little like scenarios, but kind of flavorful and kind of give you a sense of the world in different ways. Yeah. Any other comments on Curse of the River Goddess? Modest as it was.
How much did you screw about with these 2 little minor scenarios? I'd be interested to know.
Blight Knight, almost not at all. It was pretty much as on the page. Curse of the River Goddess, I definitely added some more stuff to it had the little hooks, like the stowaway and stuff is in it as written, but I think I added more personality to the other crew members and just made the interactions happen a lot more. I made a lot more of the smuggling guy who you thought was an ally and then you ended up tracking down and fucking killing. But I play with it a little bit, but just to add some more flavor, I think. Yeah. Okay. Then we go on to the third and final official part of the Copper Crown, the Tomb of Dying Dreams. Definitely our biggest storyline to this point. We were there for a fair while, I think it's safe to say. Chris, why don't you talk to us about the Tomb of Dying Dreams?
This was, how did we get this job? The Ordo Magica wanted us to go and check out, and I think this was episode 1 of my, and I believe Steo's perfectly coordinated attempt to just not do any of the quests. Just being but they had us hooked because we ended up destroying some Ordo property, didn't we, during the fight at the end of the last game? So we were on the hook for that. So this was basically us getting that debt waived by going out and checking on a expedition in Davokar, which had stopped responding. And at this point, Steo had not been to Davokar, and the red flags were flying already. The alarm bells were going off. So we went out. We got everything we needed. We went out. I remember we met some trades people on the shore, some northerners who I think were trying to sell us stuff, which sticks out in my mind. But then we got to the little shoreside encampment, and the people there were I recall they were completely shell shocked on account of
one of them in particular. But yeah.
And then we tried to make our way to the actual site of the main encampment, which was a Symbaroum structure, which was ringed in the forest by areas of just massive die-off and coldness, if I recall correctly. And we eventually found that encamped, a load of goblins had taken it over, and there was some negotiation. And then we found the man who was one of the Ordo Magica who had been kept prisoner, who'd gone completely nutty and was such a great character. And
he was really fun to play, yeah.
Yeah, and he was communing with the Spider Goddess and Steo's paramour, Zenatha. And that was just, of course, we didn't know that at the time, but he gave us lots of dangerous, cryptic Madden's prophecy. And then something big hole in the ground, we met the Spider Goddess and got kissed.
Yeah.
And with instructions that we were to go and recover. Now, why else did we need? Because it was the titular Tomb of Dying Dreams was not this structure. It was further away from this structure, deeper in the forest. And beneath it, there was a number of things that a lot of people wanted, but the thing that Zenatha wanted was a vial of this, not Water of the Dusk, but Dire Water, I think.
The exact term, but I want to say it's called
Vile
Yeah,
water, I think.
the vile water. Yeah,
The vile water, yeah. So
I think part of
Go.
the reason that you were going, wasn't it because fake Barmello was around?
Of course,
He got the head.
yes.
That was it. He got the head, the
Yeah, he
copper
got-
crown, and was
It-
doing something evil with it.
Yes, though I don't think you were aware that he was there yet. Like you
Okay.
definitely weren't following him. You didn't know that he'd gone to this place. It was you were there to investigate for the Order Magica, but then it became apparent quite quickly that maybe because they told you that this is where the copper crown had come from, and you were like, "Oh
yes.
shit! Well, that needs shutting down then because this copper crown is a problem." See, that was part of it, and then you found the tomb, and well, Chris, you carry on.
Yes, we found the tomb. I remember there was a couple of kind of nice, almost Zelda-like puzzles on the way in, a nice door, I recall quite a lot. And Zenatha had tipped us off about some other entities down there, which were bad news. The Queen of Thorns, or the Maiden of Thorns,
The Queen of Fangaffa. Yeah,
Fangaffa, that's the one. And the other one was like an entity of profound darkness, and they were also after the vile water, and they were going to have a fight. So it was our job to get in quickly, get the water, and get back to Zenatha. Starting off, a habit of powerful NPCs who could easily hire someone competent to do a sneaky job, hiring the least sneaky party that's ever played this game to do their sneaky work for them. Sure. We eventually kind of scoped the dungeon out pretty comprehensively and came to the throne room, where we found Hurien Lo Apac, dead king of one of the Symbaric people, slayer of a great frog beast, and his grand spear, insert name here, of which we know very little about, which Steo then basically eyes lit up because the spear was fancy, did a fair exchange of Steo's crappy Ambrian longsword for this, or crappy Ambrian spear for this one, which had a double bonus. And that started the meme of the spear with no backstory. The vile water was on a table beside him. At this point, Ephinea was very, very corrupted and becoming a danger. And something, the next thing I remember, the room was filled with darkness. We were moments from death, and Ascarai rolled a 1 on an arrow shot.
I think he rolled a 20.
Did he?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I'm for some reason Symbaroum has turned into D&D in my head. Yeah, he shot the vile water. And all hell broke loose. It had already been a massive conflict, but the fake Barmello and his cultists had arrived at this point, and it had already kicked off, but it was about, obviously things were reaching. The creeping darkness had arrived, and it all ended with well, I don't know why I'm saying it. Chris, you carry on. How did it all end? Tragically.
So it did end tragically, and it was staged at this point because Elle had wanted to detach from the scenario, but it was the treasure room opened up, and we got about 10 seconds to pick one item each. Myself and Elle both went for the chest full of, because it was a blind roll. Matt read out the things that were in there, and everyone got to pick something. And if anyone chose the same thing, tough. Only one person get it; the other person got nothing. So me and Elle grabbed the money. I gave it to Ephinea because I can't even remember at the time. And then we charged out of the place. And then the roof collapsed on Ephinea with her incredible barbarian one-shot boss's strength. She held up a stone lintel of a door and probably thousands of metric tons of earth while we got through. Somehow managed to throw me a king's ransom in the form of that chest full of coins, and then was crushed under the rock probably forever.
Yeah. And you fled out briefly past the kind of gigantic Symbaroum kaiju fight that was the creeping darkness and Fangaffa Mother of
stuck
Thorns.
Underground, didn't we? We didn't make it out. We had to go through the Underdark, which is another great part because it was Steo's first. It gave Steo a decent fear of being underneath Davokar.
Yeah. But yeah, that was Tomb of Dying Dreams. Obviously, we've only got 2 of the players from that here. Although, I know John's watched it all as well. Tomb of Dying Dreams, our first big arc. Do we have any lasting thoughts about it?
I think that it's really instilled a healthy sense of dread of Davokar in our party, and like there's so many elements of that just carry on to this day. And it's provided some excellent humorous moments as well, like Steo's spear and stuff like that. But no, like we still reference like Zanatha to this day. I know that she came up quite recently in our latest campaign, but yeah, that's pretty memorable, I would say. And would I be right in saying that's probably the best haul that we've ever had as well?
I think the one you got at the beginning of the Witch Hammer isn't bad either. We just haven't really had time to take stock of that yet. But quite possibly, yeah, it was definitely your first big financing of the group where you could upgrade your gear a bit and get yourself more established. Yeah.
I recall.
I was just going to say, I do think, obviously, me and Alindra kind of joined the party sometime after this, but it was really obvious from the start, even without knowing the details of kind of what happened there, that the Tomb of Dying Dreams had a huge influence on the characters in the player party, and on their attitude to Davokar and stuff. So it was really interesting kind of seeing that sort of bleed out such a long time after the fact.
Yeah, because I think definitely at points in what we'll come to later, Wrath of the Warden, there was discussion of going into Davokar, and Alindra was sort of in this kind of it can't be that bad kind of place, and all the rest were I liked the way it gave the sensibility of if it, in my mind's eye at least, you saying that isn't met with everyone kind of everyone's blatant scorn. It's met with a kind of silence.
Yeah, because Alindra
kind of you weren't there, man. Kind of.
Alindra didn't know better, and they didn't know better, but now do, and that's going to shape their decision making for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. We then had a kind of interlude section, which I won't go into in too much detail. As Chris said, traveling through the underworld. And then you came to the surface, randomly met a group of other travelers and made your way south, trying to break for the borders of Davokar. And on the way to the borders of Davokar, another story arc happened. That story arc is a slightly shorter one called Fever of the Hunt. And it's going to be explained to us, and I might re-roll it if Chris gets it, because Chris doesn't get it. Mike gets it. Mike, if you can, give us a quick talk about Fever of the Hunt.
So yeah, the Fever of the Hunt was we're kind of going through light Davokar, making our way down south, and I think just stumbled across this kind of outpost kind of what would you call it, almost like a frontier settlement,
like a frontier town, only instead of panning for gold or something like that, it's an archaeological dig, essentially, a very ill-informed one.
There's literally a small hill, would you say, that seems to be the focus of everyone's attention, and it's just people prospecting, almost buying a little plot and setting up a little tent there and digging around, digging in their little plot. And I think that we stopped there and initially started to do a bit of excavation ourselves, and then a load of stuff went down while we were there, which I probably can't remember all of, but it included things we met Semmel from the Iron Pact, I think, there.
Yeah, so your second encounter with the Iron Pact, really, I think.
Definitely formed that sort of connection with him. And there was also I think that a murder that had gone down, and we did a little bit of investigating into that. We heard about the existence of some sort of dark lords, I think.
Yep.
When we were investigating this murder. There was also like a real introduction to some of the other kind of factions here as well, because I think that at one point we maybe left the kind of settlement and went and like sort of met a witch outside of this place as well.
The Karahar tribe was like surrounding the place because it was taboo land, right? And they didn't have the military power or maybe even the inclination to just go in and wipe everyone out, but they were really worried that the camp was going to uncover something. And there was also present, like in the area, a roaming group of kind of like forest spirits and beasts. Like there was a great stag, right?
Yeah.
That which was a change. It's a boar in the original story, I think.
Did you change it because we'd met a boar in the prologue?
I changed it because of the boar in the prologue, and also because for me personally, as a mythic trope, I find hunter stag is more resonant. Also, honestly, I think it's because there's a banger picture of like a huge stag spirit in the book and not a banger picture of a huge, and I wanted to use the image of it. So I think that's what I did. Maybe I'm right. I don't think so. I think it is a boar in the original story.
Yeah. I think the only something that I've forgotten to mention is that like this place really lived up to the name of the chapter, like Thief of the Hunt. Like this place was clearly like driving the residents like mad. They were like they had obsessive, like gold craze, hunting for relics. Like I guess it all came to a head when like somebody dug deep enough and uncovered the kind of like the tomb underneath this hill, and then all hell broke loose. From what I remember, like this hunter appeared,
like an ancient elf,
and shot the stag. Is that right? Did I?
Yeah, well, it was like a big conflict. There was the stag seemed to be in the area, like they had some kind of like mythic hunter prey story going on between them. The hunter elf, the ancient elf rose. The stag and all its beasts overran the camp. The camp's trying to defend itself. The elf has this power that like truly maddens and frenzies people. So basically, loads of the outpost people became his like warriors to fight the stag. The Kara, the clan tried to intervene, and in the middle of all of it were some people who still had their minds, including your group, and it was a big mess.
Yeah. I think we had a big old rumble, and then we got out of there pretty quick.
Ascarai was the star of the show again. I think he because he killed the hunter, right? He shot. I don't think he killed him actually. I think he shot him and wounded him, and the stag spirit took that moment to like take advantage and kind of trample the hunter down. But that was Fever of the Hunt, and it ended with you again fleeing south towards the border of Davokar. Any thoughts about Fever of the Hunt as probably our first kind of, I guess Mark of the Beast was also a mid-length story, but
Congratulations retroactively to Mike for that perfect Hunger Wolf takedown. Is still in my memory as being highlight. Given I think that may have been the first hit he made with his weapon, which he didn't feel the roll on,
and he one shot like not a mini boss, but like a powerful enemy.
It was rolling a 1, flanking, and just everything came up Anton.
Everything came up Anton.
The one thing I remember a lot about that fight was like everyone was split out and separated, and it was actually quite desperate trying to get everyone back together again, because we knew even then that together we'd be a lot more effective at holding off these mooks and gribblies than we were in groups of twos.
Yeah. Cool. Then we moved on to another mid-length campaign. Not campaign, but storyline, which was the Bell Tolls for Castor. And you know what? Chris has already done so much of it. I'm going to ignore that role, and I'll tell Bell Tolls for Castor. So, unsurprisingly, on leaving the forest alongside Semmel, the Iron Pack member, he took you basically back to his hometown, which was near the border of the forest, a town called Castor, where you arrived, and it was fairly obvious that your luck had struck again, and there were strange goings on in the town of Castor. Specifically, that there were odd things to do with people dying, and members of the town council seemed to be going missing, and it all followed like a big kind of like rambling investigatory thing with many kind of different elements, including at one point meeting members of the Temple of the Many, the kind of religion that predated the kind of monotheistic temple of Prios. But it essentially turned out that in this town, once famed for its sort of witch trials and investigations into heresy, a different form of heresy had essentially taken over the town, and behind the scenes, a teratogenic cult, a cult that worships the more monstrous and beastly elements of Davokar, had taken control, and it was up to you to fight back, kind of claim what allies you could among the non-corrupted townsfolk, and fight back before this cult could unleash a monstrous mythical lindworm from its prison up on the looks like some hillside relatively near the town, which you did. I would start by saying that this is probably my favorite arc we've done. I like these length arcs. I think they're punchy and nice. And for whatever reason, I just feel like Castor really came together well. It was a different location for us. It felt like a bit of a come down, like a slightly more leisurely pace after the fury of being in Davokar. And like, I made some tweaks to the material that I really liked. It had some fun characters to play. Yeah, I really, really like Castor, is what I'm saying. Does anyone else have any thoughts on it?
I will, not out of a spirit of contrarianism, but I liked it the least. I thought there were too many characters. I thought it was very hard to follow. And until the last like 2 episodes, I was still completely at a loss for what was going on, or at least generally at a loss for what was going on.
Fair enough.
I would actually echo that a little bit. I think.
Oh no.
Well, this is maybe not a criticism of you or the material. It's just, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe like the party was just in their mindset of like, oh, we're going to be back into this will hold soon, and like we can, like, I don't know, maybe just sort out our affairs a little bit, and then we like we're like, okay, we've got to do this now as well. And I think that I found it confusing because there were a lot of characters, like Chris said. Also, like the kind of like relationship with the Iron Pact, I hadn't quite kind of grasped that yet at that point. So like, it was just, I didn't want to. I don't know. It was just one that didn't perhaps grab me as much as the others. That being said, still enjoyed it.
That's fair. I'm mildly surprised by that. I thought that was a gem. My view was the generally accepted point. I genuinely did. Like, I swear someone else, I think maybe he's not here. I can't speak for him. I think maybe Sam really likes Castor, and I think maybe we have expressed that to each other previously at some point, but I can't remember.
Just got a message here from Sam saying Castor sucks. Fuck you, Matt. I heard what you said earlier.
I can't. That's fair. I can't really object to that. It's fun thinking. It's funny thinking about those posts, like Fever of the Hunt and Bell Tolls for Castor. That we only had 3 characters. It's odd thinking about that, right? That we only had 3 players for those stories.
Oh, because FNA was already gone by that point, right? So wow.
slight amendment. You had 3 players, but you did have 4 characters because just like all the way through the Tomb of Dying Dreams, we have forgotten about Earthons.
Sure, Earthons was there, yeah.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Sure. But my point was 3 players.
Yes.
So you were saying earlier how it's a really good kind of like technique if you're running a Symbaroum campaign to introduce NPCs before they're needed so that the characters build a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now immediately wondering what's in store for Earthons in like future parts of the campaign.
Yeah. I don't think Earthons ever turns up in the material beyond being described and being briefly mentioned in the core book.
Okay,
so it's certainly not a plan I've made.
Exist.
Yeah, he's a guy. He's a goblin. Yeah, ultimately, a lot of this stuff, when I define an NPC like that, is just I've read the name and went, I kind of like that name. I'm going to imagine a fully fledged character behind it. And that's just the case with Earthons. It's just a very distinctive name, and I thought that's one that'll stick in people's heads. So, yeah. All right. Well, I'm sorry that you hated every moment of Beltals for Castor, but I really liked it, and I put a lot of work into it. No, that's interesting. I'm surprised.
If you had fun, Matt, that's the main thing.
I mean, that is the main thing. Yeah. Certainly for me.
We are honestly just all here to keep you occupied, as per the government agreement we all signed before we started.
Yeah. I would say if I don't know if anyone like for me, Beltals for Castor has one of my favorite changes I made to an NPC, which led to a much more emotive ending than I think the story would have had otherwise, or has as written, in the way we changed and used the character of Isocles in a bit of a different way, and led to one of the defining quotes of the campaign so far, I think. But other than that, cool. Let's move on from Castor onto something good. Or specifically, more importantly, onto something where the other 2 people can now start to properly contribute. I'm not saying they've been slacking off.
I was really hoping that you were going to roll the dice for me for one of the earlier ones, because I'd have had a go.
Yeah. So, in between Beltals for Castor and Wrath of the Warden, we did have another side story called Fetters of Stone. As I've said earlier in the stream, it was kind of like linked to the campaign, but not technically a part of it, but it is the same continuity. We actually didn't even run this one on our channel. We ran it on the Free League Twitch channel, RIP. And yeah, so I think a lot of people might miss it when they're going through the campaign. It's got a separate playlist on YouTube and stuff. If you do like our Symbaroum stuff, and I always say this, enough that people now probably roll their eyes about it. If you like our Symbaroum campaign, but you haven't watched Fetters of Stone, I honestly urge you to go watch Fetters of Stone. I think it's one of the best Symbaroum things we've done. It's got a different range of characters, apart from one, because that is the story that first featured Sir Arendar as a player character. It's got a whole bunch of other characters, including the remains of the Varagulzu tribe from Blight Knight, and a scattering of other characters who later turned up as NPCs in the other stories. It's the only Symbaroum thing I've done that's entirely been entirely self-penned. So maybe I'm quite fond of it for that as well. But I do a decent job, if I do say so myself. So yeah, go check that out. But we'll talk about that maybe a bit at the end if we've got some time. But otherwise, we now proceed to the second part of our our second era or cycle, whatever you want to call it, in this campaign, which I call Wrath of the Warden, because the only thing in it is Wrath of the Warden. So I thought that was appropriate. And Wrath of the Warden's big enough. I'm not gonna get one person to go through it. So what I'll do, let's say 3 of us will do it, right? And I'll just roll to see who does it first or whatever. All right, John, why don't you tell us how Wrath of the Warden starts?
So I don't remember exactly how Alindra got involved, but basically, Steo Ascarai and I almost said Mike because that's what his nameplate currently says, got a letter from a mysterious person saying, "Come and meet me. It's very important. I've got a job for you." And then they went and met her, and her name was Anadea, and she said, "I've got a very important job and a lot of money in it." And then they sort of had to step away to follow up on something else. And in the meantime, a huge sinkhole opened up and loads of people died. And then a horde of like abominations, or maybe not really abominations, we later found out, started trying to overrun the city. So it started in a kind of a desperate sort of fight for survival with multi-tiered, like many, you know, in an RPG where you're fighting your way down a corridor and the waves keep coming at you. Yeah, we had one of those, including them at one point saving a very nice and totally inconsequential antique dealer. Finally fighting back the increasingly monstrous looking abominations. And then I think they went back to try and find the person who said they were giving them a job, and they'd fallen in the sinkhole.
Yeah. The person with the big job for them fucking dead.
Yep.
So there we go. Absolutely. And that was essentially the beginning of it. It took quite a few sessions just described there, because the defense of Thistlehold is a long section. Multiple combats, and it has this like John says, like a multi-stage defense, and it's all done quite well, I think. In that it's like the combat in Symbaroum, if you put too much, it can get a bit much, but like there's really a sense of escalating stakes in it, and like trying to protect people. You have other people arriving to defend, and there's the one bit like near the end of it when the authorities have actually started arriving, and you had like the head father of Prios in the city in like a wagon shouting like encouragement at people. You had novices arriving to help heal people. You had members of Mahira's agency arriving. You had people like Serix Atio just being like a line breaker as they come out of the like swarm out of this sinkhole, and he's just like carving through them like wheat. And yeah, very cinematic.
Who, according to the actual in-book character art of him, looks like he literally just stumbled out of the pub swinging his sword, which is fantastic.
I think the literal thing it says is he wakes up in an alleyway and just stumbles out of the alleyway and is like, all right.
He's so amazing.
He's a great NPC. And he, of course, also featured in Fest of Stone. Yeah, so that's the first part of the Wrath of the Warden, and essentially that then becomes a kind of like investigatory thing of what did Anadea want us to do? You know, what
and who the hell is she?
Who the hell is she? What needs to happen in all of this? Which again, as I mentioned earlier, would be a lot easier to motivate a party if they were already attached to Anadea in some way. So it's kind of like a little bit of a hand wave of, oh, better find out who this mysterious dead woman is then, I guess. But we did it anyway, and there were lots of different leads to follow in this. No, I will re-roll that, Sid. John's not just...
I am happy to keep going.
No, it's okay. Stephen, why don't you tell us a bit about that mid-section of... Don't feel you have to mention it all, because there were so many different...
Why don't I tell you? Because I can't remember all of the leads that we followed. That's why.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, genuinely a bit. I mean, so the next memorable thing for me was when we went down the sinkhole, but there was a bunch of stuff that happened before that, right? Like but
it doesn't all have to be in order.
Okay.
You know?
I remember we went out to Jackad's Heart, and I can't remember why. And then we went further afield later as well to Glimmervan, which was kind of in the same direction.
Yeah, that was to find like Anadea's fellow former novice, right? I think was the idea.
We found out that Anadea had recently left the church, and she'd left following an argument with another novice. So we went to go question him to find out what was going on.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of the early leads came from the church, right? So we'd so we went and spoke to the Lightbringer, whose name
it's the first time you encountered
Saber.
the Lightbringer.
the Saber, yeah. So we met her at the church. She's essentially a living saint, so that's quite awe-inspiring moment for the religiously inclined characters in the party, I suppose. And then there was a whole kind of side thing around the other priest whose name I've also forgotten that had kind of fallen out of favor with the church as well. Because he'd been essentially Father I don't have my notes in front of me and I've completely forgotten his name.
I'm trying to remember the priest you mean as well.
The guy that had sorry, say again?
Is it Father Argidson, or am I completely...
No,
No. He means oh god, he means
Arkle's
Savola.
the guy in Glimmervan.
He means Savola.
Right. Savola. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So there was a tension between essentially the kind of like the Orthodox members of the Sun Church and Savola, who was I guess a
reformist.
Reformist, more progressive.
Yeah. And it was all like wrapped up in, clearly there was something going on with like the cults of Thistlehold. They seemed to be sending people after you. Various places got attacked, like the farm. There was also like agents of some Orthodox like extremists who were going after Savola. Basically, it was very chaotic.
We got straight up attacked by a black cloak at one point.
You did, yeah. Well, you were kind of also attacking him, but yes.
Wow, potato.
You'd kick down the door of his hideout and come in with your weapons in the air. That was also the point where Ascarai shot someone in the back.
It was Anton, wasn't it? Oh,
Anton.
Steo. On that occasion, it was Steo.
On that occasion, it was Steo. Yeah. The other big subplots that occur to me from that are, there was the subplot in Blackmore.
Yeah, that's still one of the most memorable parts of the whole campaign for me, just because I think we were all there essentially just murdering cultists by the bucket load, because that was kind of what our orders were, and because we'd been put in a position where we didn't have a lot of choice, but none of us wanted to be there doing that job.
No, it was one of the first parts of the campaign where like the sort of pseudo political reality of the setting hits hold, I think.
Yeah.
Where you're there because, okay, these are cultists, they do believe bad things, they're trying to kill us, so and the authorities have said, okay, well, you go get them then, and we'll help you. And then you arrive and you realize a hell of a lot of the cultists are cultists because they have nothing else.
Yeah. Like the cultists are not
essentially.
Yeah. The cultists are not good guys, but like it doesn't matter how hard you squint, neither are we.
Yeah,
like,
but are they not
heroes.
Good guys because they're not good people, or are they not good guys because the world has given them no other opportunity?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Particularly good guys in this moment. So, like, it definitely had that thing. It's such an evocative setting as well, I think, and an unusual one in like a fantasy, RPG where we're all used to more high fantasy, like, haha, elves and dwarves, and then it's like, oh, there's this camp and it's got humans and it's got goblins and ogres and stuff. Oh, cool. Oh, and also it's a really fucking grim refugee camp, and it's like, okay, this feels like a different setting,
and it's your job to march in there and kill half of it,
right?
Like,
yeah. There's a complexity to it, which is obviously makes the setting so much more interesting. The other subplots I remember, there was dealing with like the noble houses or the knights of Thistlehold a little bit that Aaron Dar had to do, and there was also just in general like going to like Thistlehold's administrative buildings and trying to do little tasks for people and like to get stuff done. There was a lot of going between the houses to get stuff done.
I think it was around this time that we first found ourselves on Marvello's radar. Like, unless I don't, had the party had
no, Marvello had appeared before. Marvello
Okay.
appeared prominently in Mark of the Beast.
But it was when we were doing tasks for Decamado.
Yes.
Because Anadea had a key and we wanted to figure out what the key was for. So we went to the Queen's Legate to look for any records, and Decamado was like, oh, we would love to help you, but unfortunately there's this really important thing we're working on. And also we didn't tell you how to do it and you were never here, which was recovering the tablets, I think, from the Templars.
The prophecy of Sarkamal from the Splinter Templars, who later would become part of a bigger faction of Templars, who had made off with who had in their possession these prophecies of Sarkamal, and you recovered them for the Queen, which had no later repercussions whatsoever. You also had a brief kind of entanglement with Serexatio's group of former soldiers who'd fought in the like early wars of Ambria. There was all sorts of different interactions going on. But the summary of it all was that you found out that Anadea was a member of the Iron Pact, and she had quite a vital mission to do in Thistlehold, which was that a group, one of these cults that you'd kind of like been battling with, had gone into Davokar on an expedition and had killed a great forest spirit and dragged its head back to Davokar, and they were back to Thistlehold rather, and they wanted to take that down into the sinkhole where there was an island, a node of power that you'd already encountered. We kind of skipped over you becoming the heroes of the sinkhole by going down there and clearing the tunnels afterwards, but that's what you did anyway. Anyway, this big head, that power node, a cult leader wanted to become all powerful by enacting a ritual with these things, and that's what Anadea was trying to prevent. And you now realize that was what she was trying to do. Great, that sounds like something you'd want to do too, but oh shit, we're now really late in the day. And what's going on, and how do we kind of solve for that? And I am going to roll for the next person to describe how Wrath of the Warden ended, essentially, and that's going to be Chris, please.
Okay, so this is great because I think it's at this point that Steele realized that there was a big alignment between his philosophy and the Iron Pact, and it kind of decided that, like, the best way to protect the things he cares about is to keep people out of the place where all the bad stuff keeps coming from. And Steele was kind of cogent to the fact that this was his in, that if he did a good job here. So I'm trying to pick up all the threads because there are a lot of different arcs going on at once here, and they kind of start to tie together at this point.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned the witches arriving, which is
that's kind of where I wanted to start, because we had the witches arrived after the sinkhole. No, it was just before the sinkhole, actually, or with the sinkhole almost.
Because they were like, "Has it happened yet?"
Yeah,
we were like, "Has what happened yet?" Kaboom! Sort of thing.
Has the well spoken was what they were going on about.
Yes,
which set us all off on the thing. A huge crowd at the gates as well, and we ended up getting, I think Marvella was the one who singled us out to go and do diplomatic duty. Again, a task we are not well suited for, if my memory dimly serves me.
I think it was literally because Anton could speak Elvish. It could speak various barbarian clan languages, and that was the only reason you got dragged.
And my strongest memory of the interaction with those two was that they twigged that Ascarai had the ring, if memory serves, and basically told him to earn it because he wouldn't give it over to them. Which was obviously a little tricky because Ascarai is not the member of the party who's most well aligned to him. To this, but what was the tip? They didn't give us. They only really warned us in advance, but they basically stayed out there for the rest of the scenario while we went.
Yeah, it wasn't really so much like all your different things came together, and essentially, like, I think the main thing that kicked off the end is you brought together a lot of different groups as allies. in order to shut down
of course.
the cult.
The tannery. I recall the tannery.
Yeah. And you eventually pull together enough clues to realize that this cult's main base was a tannery. And you also realize that they might be too potent for you alone. So using the recent leverage you'd gained through doing all these different jobs for people, through your new reputation as the heroes of the sinkhole, you basically picked and chose a little bit between various people you might ask for help. And you ended up going to the tannery with a not insignificant little force behind you.
Yeah, who did we end up picking? The guard was with us, I recall.
You had the city guard. You had the Ordo Magica in the form of
yes,
Master. I want to say Furiosa. That's not this IP.
Furia.
Furia.
Was this where? Because this is where Alindra. Hopefully, you'll get a chance to talk about kind of your interaction with Furia as well, and how that panned out. Because I think this wasn't this. The outcome of this was you starting your work with him.
Yeah, or at least having that conversation. I don't think it's progressed much more beyond that at this point. But
so we fought in the tannery, and then we went underground for the finale. And who did we find under there? I can't recall that phase of the battle.
You basically discovered, first off, you had like clearly the people the cult leader had left, like his lieutenants he left behind to stall you, and it was at points quite a tricksy fight, and also contained up to this point our only use of a kind of like transformation spell in the game, which we used and then all immediately agreed to never use again in Symbaroum because it did not feel like Symbaroum, where I think Anton got briefly turned into a lizard, which
That's
was
a weirdly high fantasy magic for what is essentially a system that relies on very Tolkienian magic.
Yeah. And then you proceeded back to the island, to the power node, where the cult leader responsible for the whole thing, who, surprise, we realized it before this, I think, but quite a few sessions before this. But the antique dealer you saved right at the beginning of the story is the big bad of the story.
The one who owed us a significant discount at his shop.
It's true. And you fought him, and I suspect Ascarai also killed him. Because Ascarai kills everyone. But I remember that fight as being, it threatened to be a bit swingy at points, but it was like most boss fights in Symbaroum. It was like a couple of dice rolls away from one of the party being killed, but also it only took about 2 rounds. Like it was pretty quick. But you ended up killing him. You took the head of Eox, the forest spirit. And oh my god, we've skipped over a huge part of the ending, which is the Hall of 1,000 Tears.
I was going to mention at some point we got to the hall, didn't we? Was that before?
Yeah,
we didn't take the
tunnels from the sinkhole went north under Davokar, and that was where we were sort of pursuing the head, right? So that's I think that's how we found ourselves there.
No, you found yourself there by feeding a magical mushroom to the cat. And then we've skipped over a load of stuff. But all we'll say is you went to the Hall of 1,000 Tears, you met senior members of the Iron Pact, including Tiara Tiana, and you had a whole kind of new view of elves and elven history and like this deep sense of there's a lot more going on here that we know in terms of like this world and the history of this world. And then anyway, once you'd finished the combat at the end, you took the head of the ox back to the forest, remounted it on the forest spirit's body, and apparently is fine. And that kind of wrapped up Wrath of the Warden, I think.
Earning us some pretty handy Iron Pact brownie points, I think, in that one, which I don't think we've completely exhausted yet.
No. But yeah, what thoughts do we have about Wrath of the Warden? I know a lot happened in it, and we've already discussed little bits of it, but what things stood out to people about it? What, good things, bad things?
This was comfortably my least favorite, I have to say. It felt like immediately like a lot of quest markers got dumped on a map. And it which initially wasn't too bad, but then it sort of felt that we had to go and tick each of them off before the next thing happened, and then we got some more quest markers, and we did. It sort of didn't feel very in keeping with how the rest of the campaigns have been run. And also, I think I really struggled to sort of join the dots between all of these different leads and how it all came together. But that was maybe just me.
It's a detective story, essentially, right? Like it's run like, well, so we just recently on this channel played Blade Runner, which is obviously a very different scenario, but a similar idea in that you're in an environment, in this case, you know, Thistlehold and the kind of some of the surrounding areas, and you've got leads, and it's just like, right, this week we're pointing the party over there to go and follow up on this lead, and we just kind of,
and
which is lead, like it's
each lead generally has a side quest, either to follow it to begin with, or you reach the lead and the lead goes, "Do this for me."
Yeah, it's
and
like super non-linear. I happen to quite enjoy that as a format, but I think even though I was new to the campaign at that point, I think I kind of intrinsically understood that this was what this thing is, and that Symbaroum probably isn't always like this.
Because if you think about it, like the Copper Crown is obviously very much the intro story, but like Wrath of the Warden being the first part of the grand campaign of it, kind of has to do some of that heavy lifting. And I think the primary reason why there's so many different leads and so many different little side quests in Wrath of the Warden is because it's literally introducing you to all the factions, giving you a sense of what they're about, what they want, what they don't want, so that you have all those. And then at the end, it goes, pick some you like to try and work with them. And that embeds you in them a little bit. And I think that's what they're doing with Wrath of the Warden. I agree that it's scattershot. I thoroughly agree that it's basically like big dramatic cinematic set piece, and then all the markers hit the map. Like I completely agree that it's like that. However, I also quite like that, and I also quite like running that because I like, you know me, I like running complex things, and I like it when like little dots are drawn between things, and I like making the players go, "Oh," and like come putting the stuff together. But it's certainly overwhelming. And if you don't like that, I guess, like people have said, slightly adventure game, video gamey style of like, yeah, you do the opening prologue and then a load of stuff, the markers will go on the map. Some people like that, I think, and some people don't, which is, well, I don't need to say that. We have Mike and Stephen as an example of that there, clearly.
So I mean, I think I enjoyed it more than Mike said that he did, but like I'm just kind of recognizing that it was that's what it is structurally for this adventure, and it is a lot. I mean, if I know we're going to get onto the Witch Hammer. The Witch Hammer, essentially, you've got your kind of your intro cutscene, and then basically 3 big markers get dropped on the map, right?
Yeah.
And this is like 10 or 12 smaller ones.
Yeah.
It's just they made different choices narratively, and
I'll speak absolutely in favor of this campaign, because I feel like at this point the stakes arrived and the investments for the characters also arrived to an extent. Everyone, these factions were introduced maybe fast and loose and quickly, but our connection to them was also solidified, and the rewards and the stakes became clear as well. I think maybe where it suffered was that it felt like there was a lot of very, very different locations, whereas the other games had kind of a chain of locations that kind of flowed into each other. This one felt a lot like, at some points there felt like there was tone issues, but I don't want to. I think that like this campaign was my favorite part so far, I think. And for that same reason, the stakes arrived, agency arrived. We felt like we were not quite at risk of being crushed under the tsunami, but definitely not in full control of the situation either. There was this very nice kind of a very nice casual chaos to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think I enjoyed running. Obviously, we've only done. I guess you could count the Copper Crown as a big chunk. But if we're just looking at it from a Throne of Thorn standpoint, I think I prefer Wrath of the Warden to the Witchhammer. So I think this was the arc of the two that I preferred. But I don't know. John, you got any thoughts on Wrath of the Warden?
I think I vaguely agree that it's very sprawling and long, and that I felt that a bit overwhelmed by it. But I think that compared to the sort of later Witchhammer setup, I think I preferred Wrath of the Warden. Because Wrath of the Warden, the problem with the different markers going on the map was that there was a kind of a sense of time pressure, especially as Anadea had been like, it's a really important mission and something terrible is going to happen, and we knew nothing about it. Whereas with Witchhammer, we knew something terrible was going to happen, and we knew that other people were going to be there, and that there was an order, all of the things. So I think I preferred Wrath of the Warden because it felt a lot more like you could do things in the order you kind of wanted to.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that's at least part of like just having like so many things rather than three big things. Like, because there's going to be a lot more choice in how you proceed and you're not locked in. Like a lot of those little subquests we kind of jumped between, right? We were like following multiple leads at any one time. So like, yeah, there's definitely more variety in it like that, I think. And I think that's partly why I like it. Rather than like three big things. There's another reason why I don't like Witchhammer quite so much, and we'll get to that when we get to the Witchhammer. But okay. Speaking of the Witchhammer, we're now looking at that kind of like cycle of stories. But I am going to break it down a bit more because, and this is something I wish I'd done with our branding and listing of the stuff as well. But we actually started the Witchhammer with the journey to Karvosti. And on the way to Karvosti, we did two little kind of like forest ruin type scenarios that are both weirdly in Wrath of the Warden, not in Witchhammer, but they're in this. There's a section on that on like generating ruins, and it gives these two as like, oh, and here's two like scenarios sort of thing. And we did both of them on the way under the guise of like that we're going for the Ordo Magico, like further work for the Ordo Magico, right? The first one of those is called Green as Copper. And shall we have this? And I can imagine that these two scenarios are going to be ones that people don't remember so well because the Witchhammer will have blasted it out of their brains. But how about Mike tells us? Oh no, Mike shouldn't tell us about this because Mike wasn't in it.
Mike definitely doesn't remember.
Mike wasn't in it. In which case, can we have John please tell us about Green as Copper?
So Green as Copper was our premise for leaving Thistlehold to go up to Karvosti, which is our good old Ordo Magica friend Ganderald had hired us with whatever research grant he'd been given to check out a couple of possible sites of historical elven interest, I believe.
Treasure.
Yeah. Well, for him, whatever the Ordo Magica version of science was, but for us, treasure. The first one was already claimed by a group of treasure hunters who very politely negotiated an amount of money that they would find acceptable to leave the site, which I nobly halved from their initial offer, and they took the money, and then they later tried to kill us to get the rest of our money. And we got our money back, so it was fine, and no one needs to say anything about anyone's bargaining abilities.
Arendar is lucky we got our money back.
I halved the initial asking price.
I I thought that was such a wonderful in character thing for Aaron as well, because he's just like, you know, $100 is not much, probably. Like, this seems fine.
It's less than 200. It's fine.
Yeah.
We'll probably find more than $100 in here. People are always talking about all the treasure you find in Davakar.
I know how Star has like kind of seen better days, but I really kind of got the sense of like sort of misguided nobility in that.
I think with Aaron, it's more like he's never had $100, so he doesn't really have a concept of how much $100 is.
Yeah,
he's just like, well, that's a lot, but treasure hunting gets you a lot of money. Yeah. So,
but they said they were going to kill us, and like being alive is quite valuable.
Well, yeah. But I think that, that was the main site that we visited, where we went through the ruins. We found it wasn't an elven site. It was a Symbaroum site.
Yep.
And we found some stuff in the rubble and a beautiful story, basically environmental storytelling of who had lived there. And like the love story between the owner of the place and I just remember the lover's name being the password to open the door to the secret chamber, which was very sweet. And then we went through the secret chamber and down into a pit and found the owner of the manor just sort of sitting there, dead but chilling with all of her family and loving it. And they were just like, didn't stop us from looting everything, as long as we didn't try and kill them.
She was like, don't hurt me or my family, and leave the things that we have on us with us. Otherwise, the treasure room's basically over there. Knock yourself out.
Yeah.
And you did, almost literally.
You know, like, telling that story back, it is just a bit like, take what you want, just don't hurt us.
Sure.
Like we were burgling her house, you know? Like,
yeah, well, you kind of were.
Yeah.
And then there was a big fight with an abomination that she'd experimented on at some point in the past. Which was, possibly actually the most close we've come to a genuine party kill to that point in the campaign. Maybe even since then, I'm not sure.
Up until that point, I think since that, there have been others since.
There have been a few.
That was bad.
Yeah. And you found some treasure and moved on to the second scenario, which was called A Blooming Vale. And Matt, if you could tell us about that, please. Okay, if I have to. So the second site you found was a sort of valley that you all managed to clamber your way into that had like an old Symbaroum ruins in it, including a tower, like an old estate. It looked like you ventured onto it. It all seemed very, very empty until you found the massive warehouse full of the shambling dead, who seemed to mostly consist of previous adventurers who'd come to explore this place. This horrible environmental foreshadowing notwithstanding, you decided to go into the tower. You discovered a number of Templars and their squires who'd been ensorcelled by the master of the tower to defend the place. You tried to save them, really only ended up saving one of them, although that person is Revelia, our ongoing squire of Valindra. You made your way up to the tower to confront the kind of Symbaroum necromancer lord who'd set up this whole scenario. The fight with him wasn't again, it was a swingy, quick fight. For once, it wasn't Ascarai who cut down the boss. It was Elindra who cut down the boss, or rather, her sword kind of cut down the boss and also spoke and seemed to drain his soul out from him. All of which was quite a surprise to Elindra. And something that's still kind of outstanding, I think it's safe to say. You then quickly realize that like the this horde of undead at the base of the tower had got loose and they were swarming up the tower even now. You had a desperate climb down the side of it. One of the remaining the Templars who had survived sacrificed himself so you could escape. You fled the horde, fled the valley, with some treasures, though still. And that was it, really. You reunited with Ganderald, or maybe I think Ganderald was with you all the way. And then you made your way to Carvosti. And that was a Blooming Vale. Any thoughts on Green as Copper or a Blooming Vale, like little side quests such as they are?
What fun! Didn't we find a statue in the courtyard of the Blooming Vale with
yeah, the family name of the Necromancer Lord seemed to be the same name claimed by the big bad cult leader in Wrath of the Warden.
Yeah. Steel was absolutely 4-dimensional time loop storytelling, trying to figure out how this guy went back and forward in time at the same time to become the guy, and that was the new main enemy of the campaign. So, but it turned out that was not the case. It was just a happy coincidence.
I think I literally gave the information of why they had the same name, not even in campaign, because I saw no way for your characters to discover it, but I was also happy to drop it because I don't think you'll ever find it out. And it's also not particularly important. But I think I eventually revealed it's like Ambriagos is a Symbaric name, and the cult leader guy had adopted it in a kind of 19th century spiritualist way of like, I am not called, Albert Green now. I am called Ramesses Alexander Caesar, sort of thing. It was a pretend, giving himself some kind of false authority.
We were not so deep into Davokar that it's inconceivable that he could have even come and looked at that exact statue, and,
yes,
and then run away.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Any other thoughts on Green as Copper and Blooming Vale?
I thought it was really nice to get some little bite-sized kind of flavoursome nuggets of treasure hunting.
Yeah,
I know, Witchhammer went on to become, in many ways, kind of the ultimate sort of treasure hunt. And there's a kind of there's something nice that comes with the scale for that, but I think just little bits of let's just go knock over this tower and try and see what we can get out of it.
And it's like the training wheels for going further into Davokar, right? Yeah. Okay, then let's get on to Witchhammer. Here's a little bit of info about Witchhammer before we get into it in earnest. Witchhammer is by far the longest arc that we've done in the campaign so far. Even if you discount Green as Copper and a Blooming Vale, it's very long indeed. Specifically, our playlist for Symbaroum, which does include a couple of roundtables as well, has 118 videos in it. Now, we've done around that many sessions, including roundtables and a couple of trailers. The Witchhammer took 42 of those. So it's over a third of our playtime has been the Witchhammer. Quite a lot. For comparison, Wrath of the Warden, 29 episodes. So quite a bit longer. Although actually, that's an interesting point. Actually, that might be... I think I'm including another thing there, which we'll come to right now, which is a story without a name, really. I never gave it a name, but we'll call it Antom's Interlude. And I'm not going to roll the dice for this one. Antom, why don't you tell me what Antom was up to while Green as Copper and a Blooming Vale were happening?
Anton was given a delivery boy task by Disaber, taking a letter to... It wasn't Indaros. I can't remember where it was.
Ravenia,
thank you. Top secret mission. If the letter was going to fall into someone else's hands, destroy it. and along the way, he met a merry group of traveling companions, and then things started to go badly wrong. One of the companions that he met was Captain Lindra, the Queen's Ranger, who becomes relevant later on. But yeah, we kind of got massively beaten up and captured by oh god, I can't remember his name.
His name was Mal Rogan. He was like a former Queen's Panzer Knight turned undead bandit chief.
Yeah, and Anton was pretty close to dying there. But anyway, sort of escaped that, and then made his way to Ravenna and delivered the message. And I completely can't remember what the message said now.
I don't think Anton does know what the message said.
I think he did get like tidbits from it. Like I think there was like some payoff, like some kind of information payoff at the end of it.
I think generally he just had the impression that like the message obviously it seemed secretive from the beginning, but also there was an element to it of like there's some danger in this. Like this message is dangerous in some sense, presumably politically, being as it was from the politically prominent Lightbringer to Duke Inadar of Ravenna. There's something going on there. You'd certainly got the impression that it was something that those two people had spoken about previously. And like this was like a confirmation or a rejection, something like that was like moving that conversation forward.
That makes sense.
But precisely what it was, I don't think you knew.
Okay.
Met
That's good to me, so my memory hasn't completely failed.
No, you'd met a few people in Ravenna. Obviously, one of our new characters got killed along the way. Was it Steven's character who got killed in the bandit attack?
Yes, Iamian.
Yes, Iamian was slaughtered by Mal Rogan, I believe. And
yeah, they come in.
Yeah.
All right, Ian, nice to meet you.
Thanks for watching the stream, folks. Sorry we couldn't get to Witchhammer. But yeah, that's Antom's little interlude. And here's a it's not a spoiler, but here's an intriguing tidbit of information. We're kicking off again with Symbaroum on May the 8th. The story we're kicking off with is another mid-length one. It's called What's Bred in the Bone. And immediately anyone out there who's read What's Bred in the Bone will be very intrigued with the stuff I did with the interlude. In many ways, Antom's interlude has been the prologue to What's Bred in the Bone. So I'll leave that there. But then let's go back to Witchhammer and all the excitement of that. And again, we're going to split up the Witchhammer, but we're going to split up the Witchhammer into 5 bits because there's kind of 5 bits of it, and we'll go through those in sequence. And the person taking the first bit is going to be John. John, could you tell us about arriving at Carvosti until leaving Carvosti for the first time?
Right. We arrived, the most of us arrived at Carvosti. We were hanging around for a week or so, I think. And then one night we were in the pub and Anton suddenly appeared. So we were all reunited. And then probably exactly the same night, the local drunk ogre, Crueljaw, started getting particularly loud and morose about his friend Elmendra.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Elmendra, who was not well and had gone and had a hammer that she'd given. It's hard to remember because he wasn't entirely making sense, but basically he gave us the opening exposition.
Mm-hmm.
There was a hammer, and maybe Elmendra had found the lost city of Symbar.
Yeah. Which was kind of the pub goes quiet point. literally, where he was just raving about all these different things, and then he casually dropped that she said she'd found the location of Symbar, and all of a sudden, like, you heard a pin drop.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where everyone tries to leave as quietly and unobtrusively as possible.
Oh, wasn't that weird? Well, I have to go and maybe talk to some people. Nothing about that. Yeah.
Everyone leaving just in time for Karvosti to be attacked by a group of people seemingly wearing old Ambrian, like the original Dark War uniforms.
I don't think they were from the war.
Well, they were like reminiscent.
They were out of like, they were old, old uniforms.
Right. Yeah, and they were attacking Karvosti, and
well, not so much Karvosti, specifically they were trying to kill
I don't remember
the High
his
Chieftain.
name.
The
High Chieftain. Which we sort of stopped them from doing.
At least partly, yeah.
At least partly. And then kind of in the morning were rustled up by the Wrathguard and basically told, well done. But at the time, we didn't know if they were friendly or not friendly. I'm trying to remember.
You don't need to go into this much detail.
Okay, I'm just trying to remember events.
The next thing
we were finding out where Almendra had been in order to figure out where she was going. We were trying to find the people she'd talked to. One of them had been murdered in his tent. One of them had been thrown off the side of Karvosti. And one of them was in like a town or a village a little bit away from Karvosti.
The Viara outpost, yeah.
That we went to go find him at, and just happened to be there as it was attacked by a lindworm. We have a precedent for going places just as they are being attacked.
Mm-hmm. By lindworms.
By lindworms specifically. We escorted him back to Karvosti, and he said, yes, I can tell you all of the things, but you have to make a bargain with me if you want extra information, and we didn't. And that's going to come back to bite us later.
Yeah, absolutely. And he essentially, like, from a compilation of all these elements, you found out these central things. Almendra may indeed have found the way to Symbar. She had found that in the tunnels under Karvosti, a place you cannot go. And there were 3 elements to her finding her way into these tunnels. One was she gained some kind of help from a girl called Alida, who had fled to the east to her home village of Earthmore. 2, she had found her way. She had found the way past a gate that she needed to get past by going to a ruin called Fria Ligan, that she spoke of as, I woke up some real bad shit there. And 3, there was an island on Lake Volgoma called
Yepheron Isle.
Yepheron Isle, that she had gone to, and that was where she found out where the gate was. And she also said Yepheron Isle was really, really bad shit, and everyone she went to there died. So then you basically had, as we kind of discussed earlier, 3 big map markers. New Earthmore, Fria Ligan, and Yepheron Isle. Coincidentally, also the order you went to them in. So, Chris is ducked away for a moment. So why don't we have me talk about New Earthmore? Of course. New Earthmore involved a trip upriver, going far to the east. You veered first past a barbarian settlement called Archbridge, which you hadn't been to before, which gave us a chance to have more of a look at like barbarian culture beyond like the stereotype that the Ambrians have, which I thought was quite interesting. I remember very specifically making a big thing about, you kind of went there and went, this doesn't really look much different to an Ambrian settlement other than people are dressed differently and the roofs look kind of different. I was, and specifically, I think Elindra was like, I was kind of told that barbarians lived in mud huts and realized maybe things aren't as black and white as that. You went up the river to New Earthmore. There were various little ports of call along the way. When you arrived at New Earthmore, again, in your tradition of arriving at places in trouble, you realized that New Earthmore was under siege from some ill-intentioned barbarians from further north. You also bumped into a group of other treasure hunters because it became very quickly apparent in this that you weren't the only ones trying to track down Elmendra and therefore the lost city of Symbar. In fact, there were quite a few other groups on the way. You'd already met the Black Cloak group who were traveling under Father Argaton. You'd heard tell of, I think, in fact, you'd already realized that Marvello was already on the trail because you bumped into him in Carvosti. And you also met another group of treasure hunters led by a man called the Gesto, who went on to become a very important NPC through the course of the Witchhammer and a close ally of the group. Although at first it was a bit like, do we work with this guy or do we murder him in his sleep? At least that was Elindra's point of view.
It was that way almost to the end of the campaign. Like, I think by the end of it, it's like, no, he's one I trust. Like, she can't reasonably be suspicious. But it lasted a really long time.
I think by the end of it, Elindra was sometimes more on the same page with DeGesto than with the rest of the group.
I think so.
So yeah. But anyway, Earthmore. You made contact with the villagers inside New Earthmore who were Ambrians who'd left because of wanting a sense of religious freedom. They traveled north from Ambria and set up their own village in the forest. You came to an agreement with them that if you routed the barbarians outside the gates, then they would let you in and let you talk to a leader. You did this in concert with DeGesto and him using his alchemical grenades and fire tube and some real, vicious fighting in this camp. Again, a close call to someone dying, I feel, at some point. The barbarian leader, Fundiber.
I checked my notes.
Definitely nearly killed someone. At one point, he also had like a pet troll called Grap, who you had to dispose of. But in the end, you were triumphant. You entered the village only to discover that the village had also been infiltrated by another group of treasure hunters. These treasure hunters were Templars, and specifically led by a Templar you'd encountered before, and not only encountered him, but stolen a prophecy of Sarkamal off him. And clearly, in the intervening time, he'd clocked what you'd been up to the entire time. You entered a fight with them, which was, again, bloody. The Templars were cut down, but also the mother? Yeah, the mother of a leader was killed in that whole thing, right? Her father survived, her mother died. A leader eventually talked to you, and I think at first you felt it had been a long trip for very little information, although that information did come in handy later on. She gave you more of an insight into the tunnels under Carvosti, what they were for, how they were laid out, what you might find under there, and also told you to look out for someone called Aurelia under there, because she might be a problem, or maybe a help. Turns out in the end, she was kind of both. After leaving New Earthmore, we decided that we wouldn't go back to. In the end, we didn't go restock at Carvosti. We just went straight to Fria because it was like between the two. So yeah, we went to Fria, and on that point, Stephen, tell us about Fria, room by room, if you could, please.
Fria, room by room.
Yeah.
In Symbaroum.
Well, in Symbaroum. Well, so I mean, before we got there, we had a couple of. So Fria was like a good week or so's hike north from some spot of the river. The the first thing that we encountered was the old Sun Temple, right? Which was built largely underground, or certainly the remaining parts of it were built underground, which is reportedly, very old as these things go, and certainly like interesting in like its depictions of Prios, in that it had like I guess lots of different forms, like things that were like recognizably depictions of sun deities, but not all necessarily the same person. So like there was something older and weirder going on there.
Yeah, I think you definitely got the sense of this place that a lot of the church of Prios has claimed as, look at this ancient church of Prios that gives us like a like what would you call it, like a
legitimacy,
prior,
like it's
legitimacy, like, and you went there and went, I mean, some of these look like they might be Prios, but an awful lot of these don't look like Prios at all.
So on the certainly on the way north, that was mainly just a kind of an interesting day's sightseeing, I suppose. But we came back that way later, and it had changed. We stopped off briefly at some Etacop, which is kind of big pillars of weird organic stone that we kind of mined,
kind of like amberish sort
of
like
amber, whilst being attacked by horrible giant flying insects. But that was quite useful in terms of like giving us some currency for barter, like later on in places in the forest where they were less likely to be interested in Thala. So and then we eventually from there over a swamp into half submerged in the north end of the swamp, Fria Ligan, which was a Symbaric palace, I think. An absolutely enormous complex. Certainly in one corner, like half sinking into the swamp, and just full of horrible things. So kind of around I seem to remember around the north edge, the north entrance, there were we were attacked by something hyena-ish.
They're called Fey beasts.
So we were attacked by the Fey beasts immediately upon entering the main kind of north entrance, and were rescued by elves who seemed aligned to the Iron Pact, but again kind of revealed that the Iron Pact was perhaps a bigger, more complicated, more fractured organization than we'd previously believed. Kind of warned us off the place. Didn't we get actually shot at by them?
At one point later, yeah.
So that was like out, and then also hovering outside were the Queen's Rangers, who we were equally trying to avoid, because I think if we'd because DeGesto hated them, was going to try and kill them. But even if we'd persuaded him to stay calm, I think we'd have been immediately conscripted. And we were hesitant to do the Queen's work at that point. We were treasure hunting for ourselves, really.
Yeah.
Or for Elmendra, or to try and find and rescue her, or just to try and shut the way behind us. To Symbar.
Variously for the different party members.
So we encountered like doors that we couldn't go through, and we had to go over. There were big rubble piles full of snakes. There were corrupted. Were they also Fey beasts? Horrible corrupted animals.
They were hunger wolves.
Hunger wolves.
Yeah.
We encountered Askarai, who was the biggest danger in the whole place.
Yeah, who again shot someone in the back. Yeah.
And Farron, there were lots of sinkholes that we lost various NPCs down. And then there was the liege troll.
Yeah.
Who we'd heard singing over the course of several days and alternately tried to kind of get near and then run away from. Eventually, having kind of limped our way through as much of the structure as we reasonably could, concluded that whatever it was that we were looking for here, it was where the singing was coming from. And so went and did a surprising amount of speaking with the lead troll.
Mm-hmm.
But it inevitably descended into what I recall as being a fairly brutal combat.
It was very brutal, and it was also in the immediate you arrived in the immediate aftermath of a last gasp assault on the trolls' home by the rangers, who were either in pieces or, in one memorable scene, became in pieces in front of you.
Yeah,
they were fashion.
If you just to imagine several balloons of red paint, this was kind of how the trolls treated them. Yeah, it was very messy. But we squeaked through, and we eventually found a short way underground, a door with a bass relief which had some moving parts which formed the locking mechanism that we were able to study, understand, realize that it correlated to a door under Carvasti, and then blow up to try and ruin that as a clue for anybody that might come later.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my best summary of Fria Ligan.
It's a very good summary. It is very huge, and the hugeness of it will probably crop up in my review of what I think about the Witch Hammer.
Same.
You then headed back via the Sun Temple, and I suppose we should mention at this point that during all this, the news had arrived that the Templars, the guardians of the church, had split off from the church. And seemingly had some venture into the Sun Temple, which did not go entirely peacefully. We won't delve in micro into the politics of there, but shit was happening in general. You headed back to Carvasti, kind of girded your loins, got resupplied, reassessed everything, and then off the back of that, you headed out to Yepheron. And Chris, can you take us through Yepheron Isle, please?
So after a little bit of choosing which boat to get, we got on with some of the Zen. What's the name of the tribe we made friends with? The water tribes.
The Zendaya. Yeah. They're called the. I know it's a joke. I've forgotten their name, even though they're like one of my. They're hardly detailed at all in the books, and I've made up a lot of detail about them for our thing.
Is it the Zarek?
The Zarek, yeah. And they're now probably my favorite of the tribes because I like what I've done with them.
They're where half the party want to join when they retire.
Yeah.
They basically are retirement home. But anyway, we got on a boat with these people, and they are Lake Volgoma natives. So we managed to evade a pursuer, which we located, which we found out on the first night departing the place. And we came to their place. We kind of mentioned Yepheron Isle, and they did that thing where they're like, "Oh, you can't go there; it's taboo." And we're like, "Yes, we've this. If we go to 3 more taboo sites, we get a free coffee." So we eventually talked them into an arrangement where they would drop us off, wait for a day or some period of time, and if we didn't come back, they let us go. They would just assume we were dead. So onto the Isle we waded. It was a horrifying place of corruption that creeped through everyone. But at this point, Steo had the magical ring of protection against environmental corruption and was very joyous the whole time. There were trouble right the way through. There were attacks from sprites. There was a storm of undead wraiths around an elf who seemed to be chanting to keep them distracted. And this was in this old Symbaric town, and we scaled up through there, holding our course by a little mountain river to get up higher and higher because we had a good idea of where we were going, and that was eventually a very large temple with what seemed to be the guts of an army outside of it. I dimly recall. undead army awaiting any traveler. So we found the side door, to paraphrase The Hobbit, via a path through through a cave, where we rescued some bear cubs after killing
rescued them from their now dead parents.
Yeah, about that. Found a tunnel with some traps in it. Found a big old door, which we spent ages trying to open, and I can't quite remember the solution, but open it we did.
In the end, you did not do the solution. In the end, you tore the control panel off, and Gester used the last of his explosives to blow the door.
Yeah. Behind the door, I believe we had another small combat encounter, but then we had the goddamn time frog, which is horrific. Basically, this frog with this kind of gossamer, this kind of sack full of dead faces on its rear side, one of which was the old king who, through
So
our
the
research,
high priest, but yeah,
the high priest, through our research and through finding some of the documents of the other corpses and desiccated bodies, had found that there was this whole story of how a deal was struck by the original inhabitants of this island to strike out against Simbar, or strike out against Carvosti. And this high priest gave us a mental map, quite literally, of the route through the tunnels in Carvosti to get to the gate that we had the entry to.
Yeah, absolutely.
We then scarpered, we cheesed it, we did one.
Yeah, you absolutely did. You made it back to the Zarex and then made it further on to the north of Volgoma Shore, where you encountered a different barbarian group who were happy to take the bears off your hands. You circled back round to the or traveled back towards Carvosti. You now had the location of the way into the Undergate, but you felt you needed to resupply and kind of, get your bearings a bit. So you headed back to Carvosti for one last stop. Unfortunately, Carvosti was under siege. Again, a place you go to that's not in the best of circumstances. The reason it was under siege is because Queen Corinthia of Ambria had discovered that the way to Symbar may now be available. She was fairly sure that Tharaban was protecting the witches from being asked for that information by the Queen herself. So she had basically laid siege to Carvosti. And you were in the middle of a sort of detente where she'd said, you've got 3 or so days to tell me or we attack. And that's really raised the stakes considerably. You went into the Carvosti siege camp in order to get resupplied and get some rest before you headed back out towards the tunnels under Carvosti. However, you were made almost instantly by Captain Decamedo, the just a guard captain, sure, of Thistlehold, who brought you in for a secret meeting with the head of the Ordo Magica and himself, where he basically said, we're not stupid. We know what you're looking for. We know it's the same thing we're looking for. You are citizens of the Queen, and wouldn't it be better for everyone, really, if when you got that information, you brought it back for the Queen in return for a considerable payment, rather than any alternative solutions that might happen. It's not that you agreed to this, really, so much as you were like, okay, well, I guess we don't really have a choice. Decamedo linked you up with Marvello, who was still hunting for it and had a force of Queen's Rangers. You had also entered into an agreement with Yosefia, a thief and leader of another group of adventurers after Symbar, because she had a couple of little bits of information you still needed. You all proceeded to the rift on the shore of Lake Volgoma, headed down into it through the underworld towards the Undergate. You had been gathering clues towards this whole time. You found your way past it. All your information was correct. You made your way past the Undergate and into the tunnels under Carvosti. Tunnels that had 2 things of immediate importance to them. One, that still had the footsteps of Elmendra in the soft dirt and stone of the floor, enabling you to track her proceedings very easily. And secondly, the tunnels were very immediately, obviously infested with spiders. This was perhaps, I mean, turns out later, was why the witches had sealed the door and had kind of gone quiet, because they were trying to negotiate/deal with the spider infestation in their tunnels. You found a number of very interesting things in the tunnels under Karvasti. A couple of things I will highlight now. You found Alwyn, the tall, unknown being who sometimes dwells on top of Karvasti, who seemed to be dealing with and keeping asleep some kind of vast, foreboding figure lying under an underground lake. You don't really know what that was about, but it definitely left you feeling somewhat alarmed and uncomfortable. You found a great deal of further history about Symbar and Davakar and all those things. Specifically, it was brought to your attention that the downfall of Symbar may not have been the kind of like magical cataclysm you have been taught about or have heard about, but instead seemed to be perhaps at least partly down to a union of elves and spiders, who you saw in a tapestry attacking it. You met a captive elf along the way. You'd also met up with the leader of the Black Cloak expedition, Father Argaton, who'd been lurking outside the gates. More about him later. And then you encountered, you made your way to the reliquary and encountered Aurelia, the former Huldra, now seemingly possessed by something corrupt, who offered you a deal, which was, I won't kill you if you go get this thing for me. Or you can give me that thing that Argaton's carrying. Which you basically, the group as a whole came to the conclusion, we kind of have to head in that direction anyway. Let's go get this thing sneakily, this urn that this Aurelia is after, and we'll fill in the blanks later. You went off to do that, only to eventually, on the verge of finding this thing during a fight with a lot of spiders, you were betrayed by Father Argaton, who ran back towards the reliquary to make the deal himself with Aurelia for the information leading to Symbar. The group scattered in various directions, although all the player characters followed after Argaton. And eventually, basically, everyone had to flee the tunnels. The spiders were rampaging. Argaton had got what he was after, and now the pursuit was on for him, leaving the tunnels. You headed through the underworld, headed to the shores of Lake Volgoma, caught up with Argaton, having left the rangers along the way because they were mostly horribly wounded. And on the shores of Lake Volgoma, you realized, weirdly, after wounding him horribly, that Argaton's only goal was to destroy the way to Symbar. He had had a personal spiritual revelation across the journey, oddly similar to that experienced over the course of this campaign by Stio, by Arindar, that Symbar was not something Ambrians should fuck with. You kind of came to a similar conclusion. He couldn't stop you taking a copy of the route to Symbar, and then in concert with him, you destroyed the tablets. A corruptive act that was had some threat towards you. You destroyed it and threw the tablets, the thing you'd been seeking this entire time, to the bottom of Lake Volgoma. You then returned to the siege camp, where you gave Corinthia a lot of information, but very crucially, not the rubbings of the tablets that you'd taken. And you ended the story in a very sense of political unease. A great amount of change was going on in Ambria. The Queen retreated her siege, so things are still in like somewhat of a non-war-torn sense, but there's a whole lot of shit going on. There's all this stuff to do with Symbar. The information you gave to Corinthia wasn't everything you had, but maybe it will be enough to set her on the trail. What's happening with the Templars and their schism from the church? What's happening with all the other kind of political machinations going on in the church? What's happening with the sudden appearance throughout this storyline of mysterious barbarian warriors marked with a crown wreathed in thorns, who seem to be having their own agenda of things. Like, the Order Magica is clearly involved in this, and they've got to have some kind of motivation. The cults across Ambia are rising. We've seen that happen, not particularly in the Witchhammer, but across the course of this campaign. Why is that all happening now? What is their motivation? It's a shitstorm. And that is where we ended the Witchhammer, and that is where we will pick up what's bred in the bone. There may be another interim story, although I might place that after the longer one. And then on to part 3 of Throne of Thorns, which is called, in a wonderfully endearing continuation of happy stuff in Symbaroum, is called The Darkest Star. So, thoughts on Witchhammer? I have my thoughts on Witchhammer, but why don't we let someone else pick up the torch first?
I'll say it. Fria Maroon was too damn long.
Undoubtedly, yes.
And we only got through half of it.
Yeah.
You only got through half of it. There was literally an entire goblin tribe in the ruins that you never encountered.
I can believe it, and I'm glad that we missed them. It was really cool having explored some little ruins, like getting a sense of the scale of what a Symbaric ruin could be. But from a practical point of view, we were in that place for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah. I think for most groups playing it at a tabletop together, it would be a better experience than what we had. It was made more difficult by the fact that we had to keep referencing the image, and that brought out, like, I think it could be done in a better way off screen, like non-streamed.
Possibly.
And I also think if I was doing it again, I might do it in a slightly different way. But like the way it's set up, I remember when I first got the book and flipped through it, and that page, that double spread, fell open, and I was like, okay. Like this feels, because it's the way it's set out that if you want to run it as written, you kind of can't do it narratively, because there's so many little bits and pieces everywhere that, like, it's doing the players a disservice to not put the map in front of them. And if you put the map in front of them, you have to have them uncover the map step by step. And if you do that, you have to kind of do it room by room. So it becomes, I would find, if I ran it again, I'd find a different way to do it. But like,
even an alternative, more compact map, perhaps, or something. I'm not sure. But it's
the sense of scale is nice, and I can see it. Like, I can see some groups having a real good time with it.
Yeah.
But like,
I suppose
it's because it feels so different to anything else.
Yeah, it's like you kind of always have a sense that there are dungeon crawls like that in Davokar to be found and explored. But yeah, I don't think I wasn't prepared for the scale of it. I suppose one thing that would be easier around like a real in-person tabletop rather than on a stream as well is that like role play sessions that are not streamed tend to be a bit longer than the streams that we do, so they would get through it in a smaller number of sessions.
Yeah, like 2 sessions or something, which would do a much more palatable. Yeah, I completely agree. I felt like don't get me wrong, there were elements of Fria Maroon I really liked. I really liked the stuff with the elves. I really liked the stuff with the Queen's Rangers. I really like I said, I think like meeting the lead troll, like an enemy makes an impression when he just casually bites someone's like fucking quarter off, like. And like I intentionally described it in quite a horrible way, and I think that like it made an impact. But like, yeah, there's a lot of it, and it was definitely the sagging middle of Witchhammer, I felt.
Yeah.
For me, I think the whole scenario is the part where I kind of Symbaroum is a game where the setting is half the story. And we're getting to a point now in the arc where a lot of the covers are falling off, a lot of the set dressing, and I'm at the point personally where I kind of want to artificially keep the covers on because I enjoy the mystery a bit more than I enjoy the explanations. Not that the explanations are bad, but I love the sense of wonder that we were getting in the earlier parts that we're still getting, but we're starting to see the cogs beneath the system.
It's the curse of metaplot. eventually the meta plot makes itself fully known, and you're like, oh, in some sense, it's more enjoyable being a smaller part of a bigger world, and you're only seeing it like with a flashlight. It's in exactly the same way. I talk about this a lot with the World of Darkness, in that I find that the World of Darkness does its best work when the vast amount of lore behind the scenes is only shown to the players in slight glimpses, and most of it is mystery, and most of it is unknown. And I think Symbaroum can definitely work the same way, but unfortunately, the nature of the Throne of Thorns is it's the campaign that tells the story of the setting. So
I feel like, I mean, we're not short of unknown things, though. Right? At this point.
Mysteries are being replaced by 2 mysteries at this point.
Yeah.
I think.
Like, just you've got the entirety of like Symbaric history is largely unknown, and you've got, for every one of those kind of weird factional kind of conflicts that's brewing, I feel like we've barely scratched the surface on the kind of the motivations and kind of machinations of each of those sides. So like, I don't know. I feel like there's plenty of mystery still to go around. But
yeah.
The story is definitely doing that thing of catapulting the player party into being the protagonists of that story, whether they want to be or not. You know, we're like, if the party gets to the end of the campaign, I haven't read any of the books, but like, we are going to be doing some form of saving the world before all of this is over from something.
Yeah, yourselves maybe.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts on Witchhammer?
I was a little bit surprised at how early it feels like the battle lines have been drawn, and like how we kind of managed to sort of straddle the fence there a bit between the Iron Pact and Ambria, depending on how much Queen Corinthia actually believes us. But like, I'm surprised how early in the story so far you can like cut yourself off from different factions, and I'm intrigued to know how the later books cope with all of the different directions you could have gone in that last bit.
Yeah, I won't lie, the later books, while they do provide, like, they tend to provide box outs and stuff saying if they've alienated themselves from this faction X, if they like went a different route Y, I will say you are currently more or less on the central track the books expect you to take. I think quite naturally, because they're not the good guys, but they're the closest the setting maybe has. It does expect you, to a certain degree, to go the Iron Pact route. Not entirely. I'm not saying that's like the main thing, and then and if maybe there is a lot of variety in there, but like, if there is a canon and a canon route through this, I'd say it's definitely closest to being associated with 2 or 3 of the factions, and the Iron Pact is probably the most likely it expects you to go down that route. One of the others you're also very close with, and one of the others you're kind of close with. So it's like, you haven't gone down, you haven't, taken the evil choices, or like allied yourself with like some maybe like quite outsider factions, just by dint of the fact that your characters aren't particularly like outsider by the nature of you. Like it might be a very different story if you were all barbarians, or if you were all changelings or whatever, goblins. Yeah. But yeah, that's the answer to that. Any other thoughts on Witchhammer before we
I was following on from John's surprise about how early in the overall campaign we're drawing those battle lines. I was surprised at how early in the campaign we've got. I know we're not at Symbar, but like I feel like with the stuff that we've gone through, if we were motivated to go find Symbar, we're already a lot closer to it than I imagined that we'd be early on. I would have thought that there would be like a lot of exploring random ruins. Like Davakar's a big place, with a few different kind of like of the bigger landmarks like marked on the map, and then who knows how many unmarked things. And I had imagined we would be doing a lot more going out to kind of different places in the forest, and and it's like book 2 of the campaign, we're on the trail of Symbar itself. It's like, well, okay, all right.
I to a certain degree, I definitely agree with you. I think it's like, it surprised me when I read it through. But I think like we are saying, you know, oh, we're only really like, you know, we're only two arcs into the campaign. That is a third of the campaign. We've done a third of the campaign. So like there is that. And I would also point out, and I know I've hefted these in front of the camera before, but like obviously in terms of like the next books that we're doing, like the next one is Indaros, the Darkest Star, and the next one is Symbar, Mother of Darkness. So like I think what that point of view definitely makes sense if you're like, clearly the campaign's is leading Symbar, and that's the climax. Symbar is book 4 of 6. So I think that's why it could be, but I do get it. I definitely do get it.
I think there's like, if you're expecting Symbar to be Act 3, it's not. There's a whole other.
There is a thing that's going to happen first, for sure. Because ultimately, you don't know about Symbar yet.
Yeah,
because I mean, you haven't translated this thing, and you don't even know if it's
no.
No.
I meant Act 3 as in your sort of typical 3-act structure. So
Oh right,
if you expect Symbar to be book 5 or 6, it's not. It's earlier because like there's more stuff has been
in our 3-act structure. Symbar, if the titling of these books is correct, and they are, Symbar is the climax of Empire Strikes Back for us.
Right.
Traditionally, the place where the heroes are, at the worst point that they've ever been, huh? And you go into Symbar, right? I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. But that's the thing. And I think everyone here does know what the other books are titled as well. So that's do we know what the other books are titled?
I'm sure we covered it at some point. Is it spoilers to look at the book covers?
I mean, not really. Well, if it is, then I think everyone else has already looked.
Spoiled themselves.
Like book 5 is called Alberator, the Haunted Waste.
Yeah, okay. I thought that was book 6. Yeah, wow. So we're going to Alberator, and there's still a whole other book after that.
Yeah, the 6th one does not have a location.
Unspecified.
Title. It is just called Davakar Awakens.
Amazing.
So, yeah. And let me tell you, I've read it, and holy shit. There's stuff coming. That's all I'm saying. Okay. Let's have some comments. Any comments or questions we've got? Because we've already... Oh, it's late. It's late, folks. But let's have a run through everyone's comments first. And also, before we do that, thank you for follows to Tony Onio. And thank you for a resubscribe from Azimuth. Thank you so much. John, commenters. Transvala, who left a lot of comments, and thank you for that. I did something similar to this with a few of my players going to book 5 in 2 weeks' time. It took me 2 hours. Well... It's not surprising because it's taken us 2.5 and we didn't cover 3 and 4. So there we go. But we do ramble. Next. Steve, first session taught you to look after your cloaks too. Yeah, not wrong. Not wrong. That Keller. I agree, Matt. It's one of the biggest advices I always give. Give those NPCs in from later books to cement relationships. Yeah, I've seen it like bandied around like the Reddit and stuff like that as well. It is very, it's a good tip for this campaign specifically and in general. Next. Stephen, there's definitely a pub quiz round on the theme of Symbaroum Adventure or classic heavy metal album title. Yeah. I won't lie, The Darkest Star is definitely my favorite of the
Yeah, I was just we've got the list here in the Discord, and just when you see it all together, like, you know, Blight Night, The Mark of the Beast, Curse of the River Goddess. It's just like every single one of those is like, yeah, I can picture the
they're all battle metal like albums with big muscly Vikings on the cover with big swords.
Yeah. Iron Maiden, or like bands that want to be Iron Maiden.
Yeah, I was specifically thinking of Bolt Thrower.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that works too.
Yeah. Next, what we got? Stephen, did the Castor scenario see the introduction of the buffet meme, or did it just cement it? It definitely was the introduction of the buffet meme. Definitely was the introduction of the buffet meme. I thought we all really liked Castor, which is partly why I really liked it as well. But I think I definitely have said I really like Castor, and someone else has said, yeah, that's my favorite. It must be Sam. It must be Sam.
Did Mike spend the whole stream saying that every adventure was his least favorite? Like, was he just trying to fuck with you?
Was he just trying to mess with you? This is the one I really didn't like. Next one. Oh, this was the worst.
Yeah.
No. He's not that subtle. Steve like Castor. I like Castor too, Steve. I like Castor too. So we're the elite. That's what we're coming to the conclusion of here. No bites. Yeah, Bolt Thrower, Man of War, of course. Yeah, all that ilk. Yeah. I believe the subgenre is battle metal.
Yeah.
Not my thing, but it has some very entertaining cover art, that's for sure. Transvala, yeah. Also, do you find that some minor characters become a main character due to either the story of the players thinking they are far more important than others? I don't know if that is, I'm assuming that is also a genuine comment. And yes, that's absolutely happened. But it also segues a little into someone who we didn't mention during this entire recap, which I'm quite glad at, because they're nothing.
I think Transvala left the stream because they hadn't seen this stuff yet, so they've got that to look forward to.
They have that, of course. They haven't watched Witchhammer yet. I am aware that most of the players' fascination with that character is now just to wind me up. I do get that.
I was
but I'm still not giving into the bait.
Without exaggeration, today I was like, doing the dishes, and I just remembered Beramo fuck off, and just actually giggled to myself, even after all this time.
Yeah. I like to think that in that brief shot that Chris has been so worn down by redoing our campaign that he's just swigging vodka from the bottle. Next.
He's not denying it.
The world does show the grim reality of it. Nothing is black and white in it. Yeah, and that's something I really like about the Symbaroum setting. It has a sense of like political reality to it, which, as someone who's into politics, but also into perhaps more applicably like history and periods that kind of were equivalent to this sort of place in history. I really like portraying elements of actual history that people don't really think about, and I think Symbaroum does a good job of putting elements of things like that in it that are maybe not what people think about when they think about fantasy or alternate histories or whatever. So I really appreciate that the system and setting kind of does that already, and then that lets me take that and run with it in a sense that I really enjoy. What we got next? Don't kick food. I don't like Witchhammer as much because I didn't kill any PCs, probably. Genuinely not my reason, but yeah, I haven't killed anyone since the Copper Crown.
Came close. It didn't get mentioned in the stream, but that Cleaver fighters we were trying to leave Yeffer on.
Yeah, we didn't mention that. That was a fucker. Yeah. I think Arendar and Elindra nearly copped for it there.
Yeah.
And Farron.
And Farron's nearly copped for it so many times. I'm almost pretty sure that Arendar is going to retire Farron as like, you're going to be a house cat now, Farron.
You see, first of all, Aaron doesn't have a house, so he needs to stay in the game for long enough to fix that. But also, Aaron hasn't used it on stream yet, but Aaron's got a new ability, which should hopefully make
the bodyguard. Yeah, the bodyguard one. So you're going to stop throwing yourself in front of the cat. Yeah.
Yeah, because Arendar is obviously really tanky and hasn't almost died twice already.
Yeah, you're gonna fucking cop it protecting that cat for sure. Next comment. Always fun when your GM quizzes you to see how much you were listening. Yeah, like that wasn't my intention at all. Honestly, I thought I'd have to leap in way more than that. I'm actually really impressed with how much everyone remembered that. Especially, it has to be said, Chris, really, really good memory on some of those really early arcs. Like, well done. Like, at points he was saying things and I was like, oh yeah, that did happen. So, yeah, great stuff. Gold star. Everyone else gets silver stars, you know. No one's unstarred.
I'll take it.
Can I exchange the gold star for a backstory for my spear?
Yes, you absolutely can, Chris. And here's the best news of all. I've already given it you.
In a way, this entire stream was the spear's backstory.
Yeah, in fairness, smashing the tablet of Symbar is probably either the most or second most important thing that spear's done.
Yeah, so that's the thing, that the backstory was the friends we made along the way. The backstory has been inside you this whole time, Chris. Dio's life is the backstory of the spear.
Be the backstory you want to see in the world.
Because what Dio is doing might be the most important thing it's ever done. See? Also, it does actually have one. Let's move on to the next comment, please. One thing I particularly enjoyed about the prologue are the time jumps and scene skips. Kept the pace flying along and managed to squeeze a lot of stuff in. Yeah, I really enjoyed the way that was laid out, if I do say so myself. Yeah, a real sense of progress and moving forward, which the Promised Land also does have, because a lot of the things that happen in that also happened at the beginning part of that prologue too. But yeah, it was I really enjoyed it running it as an intro thing. So yeah, it's only a shame it's so tied in with the Promised Land, because that means I can't really write it up as like a scenario on its own without changing it a lot. But no, it was fun. Yeah, with a real sense of, this isn't your granddad's dungeon bash sort of thing to it, which is nice for Symbaroum. All right, folks, that went on a lot longer than I thought it necessarily would, but it was good fun. It got us back in the mood for Symbaroum. It got everything Symbaroum bubbling in our heads once more. And if you want to catch us playing Symbaroum, then we will be streaming it again in 2 weeks' time. That is Wednesday, the 8th of May. We'll be kicking off with What's Bred in the Bone and some even more exciting news about how we will stream it. That will probably be the first time on the channel where we will be multi-streaming. Yes, when What's Bred in the Bone starts off, we will be streaming at the same time on Twitch and YouTube, so you can tune in on your preferred of those two websites. Yes, and that will be what we do kind of going forward. So, yeah, splitting our audience down the middle. That's what we like to do. So there we go. Lovely stuff. I won't do all the promo stuff. You know it all already. If you watch the end of this, this is not your first video of ours. So you know all the stuff already. And I'm tired and my voice is going. So yeah, there's lots of stuff going on. If you want the full skinny on it, I actually just sent out a Patreon update today with a whole big schedule listing. So why not go sign up for our Patreon if you want to read about that stuff, or check us out on Discord, because that has a lot of our stuff on as well. Thank you so much. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay. Wonderful. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.